Hi, I'm Bill Patton with Tennis.life, and we're going to have another interview about the upcoming WTCA PTR Tennis Coaches Summit coming up in Indian Wells, March 7th and 8th. And it's going to be a terrific event. And with me, I have here Joey Blake, and we're going to get to know Joey a little bit, and you're going to get some free stuff. You know, he's going to give you some vital information. It's going to help you coach better. And, but we're going to start with a little background. We're going to talk about, Joey and his career a little bit. And we're going to get into the affiliation with the WTCA. And then, we're going to get really practical. We're going to get into his talk. So anyway, Joey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. No, I'm glad to have you here. So tell us a little bit about you and, how did you fall in love with tennis, and then how'd you make the transition into coaching?
Well, it's actually sort of, is interesting. My father was a basketball player and also a conductor. So conducts musical groups. And so he was an athlete, played college basketball and was going through, and he was playing music and directing bands, and he was trying to find a way to just stay in shape when we were living in Michigan. So basically, he took me to the courts when I was 5, 6 years old. I'd go and follow him and just hit against the backboard, and one thing led to the next, and all of a sudden I was playing all the time. And we moved from Michigan to Virginia, and then I was very fortunate. There was some older gentlemen that approached my father and said, look, your son looks like he has a talent to do this game. You need to, try to help him out and see, where he could get some instruction to learn how to play. So I took my very first lesson with a gentleman by the name of Andy Durham, and who became like a second father to me. And he was at the old Mount Vernon Tennis World, which is over in Alexandria, Virginia, and started working with him. And quite honestly, just ended up loving the sport. I was playing some other sports and just, not really for teams, but I'd go out and play street hockey. I'd play basketball, but tennis was just one of those sports for me that was one-on-one, and I just enjoyed it.
That's good. Yeah. So the gladiatorial nature of it appealed to you. So how did you make the transition? I mean, you want to talk about your playing career? What was the pinnacle of your playing career?
Well,
and then transition into coaching?
Well, what was interesting about it was when I was a player, I ended up being a top-ranked junior all through all the age groups, and I had a choice. I was at that point, I was 3 in the world in the juniors. I was training, doing very well. I had a choice to either go professional or go to college. I made the choice that I wanted to go to college, at least to see how I would do against kids that were older. Also, being away from home. I had already lived at Bolletari's, but this was sort of, okay, go to a school. Can you keep up your, can you do your schoolwork? Can you live on your own a little bit and also compete? And I was very fortunate. I had a coach by the name of Ron Hightower, who was the men's coach there. And he recruited me. I went to school there and basically had a great career. I mean, it was one of those, it wasn't very long. It lasted 1 year, the old one and done, but I had shown up to school and won the national indoors as a freshman. And before playing in Athens for the NCAA championships, I had just, people were already asking me, agents, racket contracts, all that. It's like, are you going to stay or are you going to play? And I said, look, if I get to the round of 16, I'm going to turn. I'll go ahead and turn pro. And ended up getting to the semifinals. Mm-hmm. So I went on to the tour, was doing well. I enjoyed it, had some good wins, but then I had a severe wrist injury back then and blew out my wrist, all of my ligaments when I was playing down at the old Lipton Championships in Key Biscayne, which is now the Miami Open.
Yeah. Give us one of your top wins, somebody we might know.
Well, I mean, all through the juniors, I mean, I had wins over Mooster and Corda. Wow. I was fortunate enough to be playing against a lot of those guys. Then on the tour, I beat a guy by the name of Steve Denton. When he was still playing. I did really well at the Canadian tournament, beating Glenn Michabata. So it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but the Moo Man, that's it for me because man, Tomas Mooster was a beast, man.
He was tough. He was very like I said. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be able to play him. I don't think I wanted to play him on clay. You know, when he
Yeah,
on the tour, that was going to be a totally different thing. But
for
you
sure.
know,
Okay.
our junior career for the, I mean, if you look at what the ITFs were like back then for the juniors, I mean, Boris Becker was playing Korda, um, Horst Goff, Mooster. I mean, it was just it was name after name, and it was, you know, Claudio Pistolesi. All, you know, big. It's sort of the who's who. I think it looks like our era sort of went into coaching. I always say is like we may not have had, you know, we may not have had all the players that made it to the top on the tour. That next group that came from below us was, you know, with the, you know, Andre Agassiz and the Jim Couriers and Samprases. But it seems like a lot of our players that we all grew up together either went into college coaching, pro coaching, and you know, I sort of say the game changed, but we sort of had the old style of understanding how to play the game, and it made us better coaches.
Yeah, for sure. So now, how did you make that transition into coaching?
Well, it was interesting. I always swore when I was a player I was never going to coach, and I had was going to go back to school, and I was in Washington D.C. and I had dabbled around doing some coaching on the side. It was like, oh, this is not bad, but I wasn't really looking at going into it full time. And there was a gentleman by the name of Bob Pass who has a very great academy in Washington D.C. in the Northern Virginia area. And he called. You know, I called him. I said, you know, hey Bob, I'm looking at going back to school, but I really want to, you know, obviously stay in tennis, but you know, it looks like I might be able to help some part time. He asked me just to come and take a look at it, you know, see how I coached and see how I did with the kids, and basically called me back that night and says, well, good news is I have a spot for you. And I
Nice.
ended up basically working with a lot of his top nationally ranked juniors. So one of my very first students that I was working with was Paul Goldstein when he was coming to the
Oh,
facility.
wow. He's
So
such a nice guy. I've met him, and you know, he's one of those really genuine guys that you meet.
very genuine.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a stroke of luck, to be honest. I mean, other people were working with him, but for him to be able to come to that academy at times and to be able to work with somebody like that, I mean, it's a teacher's dream. I mean, it's a, you know, a coach's, you know, he just would basically do whatever and listen and try it. And it gave me a good sense of it. And one thing led to the next. And then here I am about 32 years later, and I'm, you know, still coaching.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah,
Thanks for bringing
exactly.
Joey in nice. You know, I mean, but it, you know, I think every coach has some kind of moment where it something clicked, something positive happened, and then there you were. I mean, it's funny because when I started coaching, I was maybe a 3.5 player myself,
Mhm.
right? And then with 1 week of training, I taught an entire summer program for a city, and I fooled people into learning how to play tennis. They were taken in. So, um, and I haven't been exposed in the last 30 years, so I don't know if it's going to happen. But I think, but when something like that happens and you're there and it happens and you're not even sure how good you are, and the people learn and you move forward, then you know,
Yeah, it was very fortunate that that happened, and one thing led to the next, and then I had moved down to Texas after there, and I wasn't really sure. I was like, you know what? Okay, I've been traveling, I've been doing all this. Maybe I need to do something else.
we got to move on though.
Yeah,
We got to move on to the next thing. But
sure.
I have to clarify though, I did eventually become a 5-0 player. I don't want
Awesome.
people to think that I stayed a 3-5 for my whole time there. So
Yes.
anyway, so all right, now let's get into. I mean, so you've been affiliated with the WTCA. How and for how long? And then let's make that pretty brief, and then let's start talking about what you're going to talk about.
Sure. Sure. Well, I mean, WTCA had always seen it online and noticed what it was about. I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak last year at Indian Wells, and I took a lot of my players and my kids down there because it was just, I believe that kids need to have knowledge. Maybe it wasn't on the coaching front, but to listen. And it was just an amazing event. The kids all came back from it going, this was awesome. Matter of fact, they've been asking me, are they doing it again this year? And I said, yeah, it's going to be going on again. It's going to be even better. So starting last year, I really got to know about it and have kept in touch with Sarah. And it's really been something that I think it's what tennis needs. I mean, especially with the girls coming up and the coaching, but also just, male and female coaches understanding that there is a difference between working with, a young adolescent boy and the girl. There's a different way to approach it. The game is also different. So even when you're running an academy, as I do, it's very tough, to when I bring my new coaches in and say, look, there's, we can do these drills, but there are different ways that we have to do these with boys and girls. And on top of that, how we, basically try to relay our message.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the parties are better. So, after in the evening, after the day on the court with all the coaching, and then we have like a social time.
Sure.
The thing I liked about it was there wasn't this sort of hierarchy. Now there didn't seem to be a thing of, different people at different levels. Everybody was hanging out with everybody, and you could have a conversation about whatever you wanted. I really enjoyed that. And I felt more a part of something that way,
Sure.
So let's get into your talk. I mean, what are some of the highlights, and then what, a couple of the details that somebody can apply even if they don't see it. But obviously you want to see Joey in person delivering. That's 10 times better.
Well, one of the things I'll be speaking about there, and the main focus will be, what is the difference between a tennis player and a tennis performer? And, I like to draw it into the fact that, everybody can play tennis. I mean, we all hit tennis balls. We all know how to hit a forehand, backhand, certain strategies. But there is always a difference when you're working with players of how to actually get them to perform. And, there's drills that need to be done. There's certain ways, the approach that you have with them. So you give them a better understanding and a better chance when they go out there and play on the court in a tournament. Because as we know as coaches, a lot of times we hear the same thing. It's like, oh, my kid plays great in practice and does all these things, but they don't really understand the game of tennis and how to perform at that. So there's many different variations on the mental side to also just the physical side in hitting shots. And as I always tell them, I say, look, we can always work on the mental side, and I think that's fantastic, and it's definitely something that has to be done. But the question is, if you don't know how to hit certain shots and somebody finds a hole in your game, that's always going to keep getting exploited no matter how you go about trying to figuring it out in your head. So our goal is to really help out. Number one, what is their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And then how do you actually plan on playing this match? And then we take a kid, because every kid is different. Everybody's going to have different strengths. Everybody's going to have different weaknesses. And we say, look, this is sort of like creating a movie. When we're doing a movie, we're going to sit there and we want to make sure everybody stays around to watch. We don't want to sit there and have them go in for the first 5 minutes and going, oh my God, I'm so lost. I just don't know what's going on. I'm just going to walk out of the theater. Mm-hmm. And a lot of junior tennis players, and even quite honestly, collegiate to pros, struggle with this at a lower level because, yeah, they're great. They can hit balls, but they're not really understanding why they're not succeeding, mm-hmm. and why the top guys are always playing well. So mm-hmm. What I plan on, what I will be showing down there is just like, obviously certain drills that can be done, working with them. It's like if you take somebody with a great runaround forehand, the question is, we know you can hit a runaround forehand, but what are the patterns that you can use to set this up?
That's great. So I'm going to, let me get in here for a second. So I've been frustrated for a long time watching many American players playing one of two ways. Either, big serve, big forehand, the point's over in 2 or 3 shots, or, kick, serve, grind, topspin, just trying to run around and hit a million shots and try to make it a physical contest and overcome their opponent physically. But then when I watch people around the world playing, then I see people with disruptive styles where they get you out of your rhythm. And I see changing court position to change the rhythm of the rally. And I see shot combinations like deep cross court, short angle on the other side, or, serve at the body, reversing, making them hit the opposite shot that they just hit. So you want to kind of expand on that stuff, because I think this is something
Sure.
American coaches really need to hear.
Well, I mean, the big thing with you're absolutely correct. Tennis around the world is many times played much different than what we are seeing here at home in the U.S. And I take it back to sort of, I feel like I grew up in that last generation of players that we didn't quite have the technology, the rackets to hit so hard, but you had to put a lot of thought process into the game of like how you actually were going to break down your opponent. You had to have a lot of shots in order to sit there and work your opponents over. And I feel like in American tennis, it got lost. I mean, we fell in love with the big, huge serve and the big forehand, which is great. I mean, the tennis world is playing like that. We're seeing a lot of guys that are becoming very athletic and tall. And what I really believe is going to happen in the near future, I mean, it's going to probably happen in the next 10 years, is all the players are getting so fit and so athletic on the men's and the women's side that you're going to see more of the coming forward, learning to play from the net than what we have today, because everybody has gotten so fast and so physical that they can cover all the shots. Now it's going to be, okay, now can we figure out how to move forward and take time away so we can shorten the points a little bit more, use different types of angles. So we used to be in the United States with, people that would serve and volley, use the slice, come in and do that. And we sort of lost it. I go back and watch a lot of the old matches and seeing where we were at, and just, it's fascinating. I watch the kids, I have our kids watch these matches, and half the kids look and go, well, that doesn't even look like tennis the way we play it today. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. If you go ahead and watch the greatest players in the world play, they do this.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens to be at a lot faster speed. But you see the Federers of the world. You see where even like Serena, or if you see Halep, I mean, how they use the court to their advantage. And, I always try to coach kids at a younger age is like, look, this is a process. You're going to be doing this on a consistent basis. I mean, I'm not trying to build you to be the best 12-year-old in the world. If you want to do that, we can go hit a lot of consistent shots and high rollers. That's it.
Okay. All right. An idea just popped into my head, and I think you can handle it, Joey.
Okay.
All right. I think you can handle it. All right. Let's say somebody's a pretty inexperienced coach, but they want one new layer to put in to develop, shot combinations.
Sure.
What's going to be the number one most useful shot combination for the most junior players that they can institute immediately?
Well, for instance, I mean, the number one is as a younger coach coming in, really learn to teach all of your students how to use a backhand slice. And the reason being is if they can start developing a backhand slice, they can change the speed of the point with their big forehand. So most of these kids are out there using a pattern and they're hitting topspin heavy and all this time, but it's the same constant ball. So there's not really a big change up compared to their biggest shot and their slower shot. So a lot of kids get into a groove. It's sort of hitting on that ball machine at the same speed. Mm-hmm. So, I try to teach all of our students and our coaches is like, look, we want a well-rounded game. They got to be able to have all these type of shots, but kids are more reluctant to use the slice because they don't see it.
Okay.
So we'll do a pattern like that.
All right. So because if you slice, then and somebody's not used to seeing a lot of slice, then they're probably going to cough up the short ball.
Exactly.
And then if it's short and slow, then you move over with your forehand and you can drill that thing cross court. And now it also looks, maybe it even is 20 miles an hour faster, right?
Exactly. It just changes the speed.
Okay. So now let's say there's like a high school coach and they're pretty accomplished. Mm-hmm. And they have good teams who can do stuff, right? What's kind of like the next level up from that? You're going to go a little bit more advanced.
Well, I mean, the next advance is like learning, again, most of the players, they don't shorten the court. So they'll stand back and use that. So we'll teach, basically use patterns with the short angles, changing the height and the speed of the ball. I mean, the name of the game is get balls that you can attack on.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically with every player is like, it could be a kid that has a great backhand down the line. It's really teaching them, how do I sit there and get you to hit your favorite shot? Not by, if you keep hitting forehands cross court heavy, that's great. You're still not going to open up the court to be able to use your backhand.
Okay,
So
so it's like Tilden said, find out what your opponent's least favorite shot is and hit it
mhm,
there, and find out what their favorite shot is and don't give it to
don't
them.
hit it there. Exactly.
Right away. So awesome. No, that's great. I mean, I really like when my kids will get the high ball from the other kid, the big moon ball, and I tell them hit it even higher than they did, you know,
Absolutely.
and then you are probably going to get a shorter ball on the next one. So be ready to move forward and attack that one. All right. So now let's say that, you know, somebody's preparing for, you know, national level play and on a, you know, and wants to aspire to be a great coach who's teaching, you know, working with nationally ranked kids, and kids are going to play D1 and maybe even have a chance at the pros. So what are
Sure.
some of the things that they need?
Well, basically, when you get to that level, every kid that you work with has to have a script. They all have to understand what their game is. I mean, too many times, I mean, I've worked with players that have come to me that are very good players, and they're playing nationals, and they really don't even know what their game is.
Mm,
And if you walk out on the court and really don't know what your true game is and what your script is of like, this is how I play, this is what I'm going to throw at my opponent. Well, again, it comes down to what I was saying before. You're a tennis player, not a performer. And so the guy that can perform on the other side is going to find a way to break you down. And the name of the game is, okay, if you have a weakness, learn to hide it. Make sure that they can't find it. And then you set up your strength. And
mm,
so we spend a lot of time on shot development, making your weapons even better. But also, okay, if you have a weakness, yeah, we're going to work on it to make it better. But you're still truly going to have a little bit of a hole in your game there. But we want to make sure we don't exploit it.
yeah. You know, I'll throw out one example. I'm coaching a high school team right now, and they're not great, you know, and none of them have great backhands. So we just spent a day saying, all right, every single time you get a backhand, I want you to hit it really deep cross court to their backhand.
Sure.
Every single time. Because, you know, making it any more complicated than that for you is only going to make things harder. You know, and I
Exactly.
guarantee you, you hit your not so great backhand to their forehand, and it's going to be over pretty quick.
Exactly. That's it. I mean, that's exactly right. Don't complicate it.
Yeah. Now, if you had to put a bow on it, because we're going to wrap up here in a second,
Okay.
what are your final words from this talk?
Well, I mean, I'm really excited to speak to everybody down there and, show some things that can help the coaches out there. I learn just as much when I go to these conferences. I love to listen, learn, pick up new things that I can use. It's all about us improving the coaching community. Somebody might be able to offer something that we've never heard. I mean, it's the same thing I talk about with kids. It's like sometimes a different voice saying the same exact thing in a little bit different way is some way that you understand that. So I'm looking incredibly forward to this with all the guest speakers, and I feel privileged and honored to be able to be invited to go back there again this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll be in the back goofing off a lot, and because
I'm bringing you on the court. You're going to be
okay. I hope to be healthy enough to make that happen, but let's see if I'm breathing at that time. And then I'm also going to have a booth and have some books and some
great.
products there that I'll be peddling. So bring
Okay.
some pocket change, people. But anyway, thank you so much, Joey. I really appreciate your time, and I'm
I
sure
appreciate
Sarah does too. And looking forward to seeing everybody. It's going to be a really fun time, everybody. So, you know, if you have social anxiety like I do, don't worry about it. You know, we can be together, you and I.
that sounds great. I look forward to seeing everybody, and thanks again for inviting me.
All right. Take care,
All right.
Joey.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.